Cardiovascular disease. By 1950, 1 out of every 3 men in the United States developed CVD before reaching age 60. CVD prevalence was twice as common as cancer and had become the leading cause of death and the reason why life expectancy beyond age 45 did not increase. There was no known treatment capable of prolonging life, and statistics from around the world clearly demonstrated a worldwide atherosclerotic CVD problem. Added to these concerns was the fact that little was known about the causes of the disease process itself, so that methods for reversing the epidemic were not even imagined. Prevention and treatment were so poorly understood that most Americans accepted early death from heart disease as unavoidable. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the wartime president of the USA from 1933 to 1945, was in no way exempt from this epidemic, with heart failure due to undiagnosed and later untreated risk factors. The medical care provided to the president before his sudden death, while still in office in 1945, shows the poor state of understanding of cardiovascular disease in the mid-20th century. These events contributed to the creation of the Framingham Heart Study in 1948. Consequently, the key was to develop a preventative approach. Preventable or modifiable predisposing factors had to be identified. This study, as developed, had one main aim and 2 subsidiary aims by Dr. Thomas R. Dauber and Felix E. Moore, Jr. First, to secure epidemiological data on arteriosclerotic and hypertensive CVD. Second, to secure data on the prevalence of all forms of CVD in a representative population sample. Third, to test the efficiency of various diagnostic procedures. The first aim was major, the other 2 viewed as byproducts. It was assumed from the start that the CVDs did not each have a single cause, but were multifactorial. Rather, they were the result of multiple causes which worked slowly on the individual to produce the disease. Factors which potentially may be related to CVD were listed in terms of hypotheses. These were generated by the Framingham investigators in consultation with an advisory committee composed of specialists representing several branches of medical sciences. The medical history and physical examination that would be obtained on the study subjects would generate data to test the hypotheses. The Framingham cohort heart study population was 10,000. Investigators applied a 2/3 sampling ratio. The examinations would be given every 2 years. 6,000 became the desired sample size, and 6,000 exams could be given in a 2-year cycle. With this sample size, they estimated that 5,000 would be free of CVD at the baseline exam. Of the 5,000, it was estimated that 400 would develop CVD within 5 years of the first exam, 900 10 years, 1,500 by 15 years, and 2,150 by the end of 20 years. The investigators decided that these numbers were large enough to produce statistically stable data. At the end of 20 years, the study would end. The Framingham Heart Study generated a sample of 6,587 subjects. Of these, 80 were duplicate names, so the potential sample size was 6,507 subjects. Approximately 68.7%, or 4,469 of these, came in for the examination by the end of the recruitment period in 1952. This initial response is considered poor and biased because a response less than 70% is far from ideal. Also, the respondents had a better mortality experience than the non-respondents from the onset. They were healthier than the non-respondents. Of the 4,469 respondents, 4,393 were free of CVD. So, to achieve the desired 5,000, an additional 888 volunteers who were previously examined but not included in the sample, aged 30 to 59 years old, were identified and invited to the clinic for an examination. 740, or 83.3% of these, returned for a second visit and were added to the cohort. In total, 5,209 were taken into the cohort. Of those 5,209, there were 5,127 free of coronary heart disease. The official sampling frame began as cross-sectional sampling of the population aged 30 to 59 years old as of January 1st, 1950, according to the town census. A separate list was drawn up for each of the 8 precincts in town. Within each precinct, the lists were arranged by family size, and then in serial order by address. 2 of every 3 families were then selected for the sample. In each family, all residents in the eligible age range were invited to have an examination. The recruitment effort was organized with 6 committees set up: the arrangements, publicity, industry, business, civic organizations, and the neighborhood organizations, which help logistics and publicity aspects of the study. The Neighborhood Organization Committee developed a network where every selected individual was contacted by someone they knew personally who had gone through the study and was urged to participate in this study. The Framingham investigators anticipated that they would obtain all their sample via random selection. Unfortunately, they had to use volunteers to obtain their desired sample size. The investigators anticipated finding 1 in 6 of the respondents with CVD. Conversely, they found 1 in 50. Lastly, the final cohort was not random and was healthier than the general population. Further, the response rate of the selected sample was 68.7%, which is not a good rate. Furthermore, the inclusion of the volunteers conceivably introduced biases beyond the obvious of a cohort healthier than the general population. The major change to the design of the study was the addition of the volunteers. Another important change was related to the inclusion of those with CVD in future examinations. Originally, the plan was to follow only those without CVD. Through analysis of test results, it became apparent that some forms of CVD were precursors for other forms. For example, coronary heart disease often precedes stroke. Also, changes to data collected at the exam, such as the addition of questions on smoking behavior. The statistical methods developed by Framingham investigators allowed for better estimation of the effects of risk factors on the development of a complex chronic disease. The Framingham investigators have always been aware that the site may not be representative of the United States and have made repeated comparisons with other regions to test its generalizability. In the beginning of the study, only incidence data was available. Once the initial examinations were completed after 5 years, it was possible to abstract prevalence data of considerable interest. It was only possible to proceed with a study of the contribution of various elements of the total examination made in the determination of final diagnostic impressions. Analysis of this type will give a basis for determining the relative efficiency of the miniature chest X-ray or of certain electrocardiographic leads as diagnostic tools as compared with the total examination. Another important type of information will be data on the range of values of various diagnostic tests for the normal populations, which have not been available previously in medical literature. The Framingham Heart Study did not develop without complications. However, the study improved over time and continues to yield valuable information. The Framingham Heart Study made it possible to test several hypotheses with respect to factors associated with the development of arteriosclerotic or hypertensive cardiovascular disease. As the abnormal group increases in size with the passage of time, such differences as are found to exist can be determined with increasing statistical reliability. For the group which becomes abnormal, the rate of progression of disease can be measured, and from the entire group there will be data which will yield estimates of the incidence of arteriosclerotic and hypertensive cardiovascular disease for a more representative population group than has, up until now, been studied. I went online and I found this link by CHI Franciscan, and if you click on it, it's very interesting. I did this test myself, and I'm going to make some changes and lower my risk for heart disease. Thank you.